Well, hello, everybody. This is episode 81 at Streets and Eats. And today we are talking about one of my favorite islands in the British Isles called the Isle of Wight.
When I used to think it was White.
Well, it does have white chalk cliffs.
It does have white chalk cliffs. It has a lot of things that are really cool, but it was one of those places that I wasn't sure I wanted to go. And then I was like, well, let me do a quick Google search as we're deciding where we're going to go in southwestern England. And I was like, oh yeah, we're going there.
We're going there.
There's more to go than I was expecting at first, of course.
Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries and all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure. Okay, my turn for the trivia question, and I'm sure I won't stump you, but I don't know. Maybe I will. This is a simple question. What vehicle can travel over land, water, mud, ice, and snow?
What vehicle can travel over mud,
Land,
water,
ice, and snow.
and it has to do with the Isle of Wight?
And it has to do with the Isle of Wight.
A ferry?
I mean, it is a sort of type of ferry, I suppose, but
A hovercraft?
it's a hovercraft. Yes.
We didn't go on a hovercraft,
No, we didn't.
but we could have.
We could have. And in fact, the last remaining ferry service offered on a hovercraft is to the Isle of Wight. It's the only one in the world.
Really?
Yes.
Well, now I wish I'd gone on it.
Me too. I'm doing the research for the podcast. I'm like, well, I knew it was there, but the problem is we had to take our car and it's a passenger only. Too bad, huh? Well, hovercraft were invented in England and they had like quite the industry of hovercraft ferries across the channel for the longest time, including ones that could carry vehicles. At one time,
We just missed the boat.
Yeah, you could have taken a hovercraft with your car across the channel, but not anymore. Now the only one remaining is the one that services the Isle of Wight out of Portsmouth.
Speaking of which, Portsmouth was quite the port.
Yeah.
So we've written an article about Portsmouth and you'll have to look it up. Maybe we'll do a podcast on it at some point. I don't know. But there's more to do there too. We were not prepared for the amount of things to do in Portsmouth.
Everywhere we went, everywhere we go in England, it's just like, wow. There's so much
I have to
do.
agree.
Okay, for on this trip, though, we did go to the Isle of Wight. So we've put together like a little planning guide, you know, what and why you would go there, how to get there, how to get around, what to see, what to eat, where to stay, all that really good stuff. We spent a good day and a half there. We spent the night. We got there early in the morning, spent the night, and then left the next day.
And we could have easily spent 2 nights there.
2 nights.
I think looking back on it, it's one of those things. You just don't know how much there is to do and how much time you're going to spend at all the little places. And we could have spent longer.
Yeah. The Isle of Wight, maybe like you, a lot of people aren't that familiar with it. It's England's largest island. It's in the south.
Is it really the largest island?
It
Oh,
is.
okay. You know, I was thinking because we also went to the Channel Islands and I was thinking they're bigger, but they're not part of England. They're just bailiwicks.
That's right. And it is part of England. It's actually part of the historic Hampshire County. And what it's probably most known for is its climate. It's got a warm, mild climate. It is the sunniest area in the British Isles. And in
It was
fact,
beautiful when we were there.
yeah. And in fact, it has more sun per year or through the year than some places in Spain.
That's pretty impressive,
Imagine
actually.
that. Of course, it's got great history. The geology is incredible with the chalk cliffs, the natural beauty. In fact, it has been designated as an area of outstanding beauty. So,
well, I think
good
one of the
reasons to go.
things that really draw people there too is Queen Victoria. That was her island.
Yeah.
That was her
She made it
go-to.
famous for-
Yeah, she made it famous. That was her go-to house in the countryside.
yeah.
So her and her family, and yeah, we'll talk more about that. And you know, we talk about where to go and everything. But I think the fact that it was so important to her is also important to other people.
You definitely put it on the map for tourism, I think. Okay, so getting there, You talked a little bit about Portsmouth, which, like you said, is a great city. It is like the home port of the British Navy and has been for hundreds of years. So that's a good reason to go to Portsmouth.
There's plenty to do there too, by the way.
But it's also where you catch the ferry or the hovercraft.
If you're not taking your car, take the hovercraft. It's the only one left in existence that takes.
Well, okay. So getting there, you can take a train from London. Takes about 2 hours.
Well, I like that you can take a train and it includes the hovercraft.
And that train includes the hovercraft ride.
So, I mean, that to me is well worth it. And I think, well, you know, it's one of those things. If we'd known, would we have done it that way? We like having our car, so it's hard to say. We do like having
our car. So the London train, you go on the Southwestern Railway, takes about 2 hours. I want to say it costs about £60 per person when I was looking it up. And it includes that hovercraft ride. So that's pretty cool. It takes you right to the island. So if you're looking for something to do out of London for the day, you could do it as a day trip even.
Or you could still spend the night there, I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then come back the next day. Ferries, of course, the hovercraft you can walk on. You don't have to go on as a train passenger. The Red Funnel and the White Link. We took the White Link ferry. That's probably the one that most people are going to take out of Portsmouth. And it's about a 45-minute ride. We had booked a later time, but we got there a little bit early and the other one hadn't left yet. So they're like, we got room. Do you want to go now? We said, sure. And I think that's pretty standard. I think that you can kind of count on that, but you definitely want to have a ticket for a specific sailing well before.
One thing that messed us up when it didn't really mess us up. We were afraid it might mess us up was we were filling out the form online. And one of the things that asks you for is your license plate number.
That's right.
And you can see why, because as soon as you pull up, they know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
They have it all figured out. But we didn't have a license plate number because we were going to get a rental car. So we actually put in the words rental and that worked.
Yeah.
And then once we did have the rental car license plate, we put that in. And like I said, before you even come up there, it's the quickest onboarding I've ever seen. They're like, well, hello, Mr. Vale. And you have one passenger. Right. And here's your little sticker thing to hang on your windowsill and go.
Yeah. So we took that ferry into Fishbourne.
Now, that was my favorite ferry of the year.
That was a good one. The first one
going. That was my favorite ferry. You know why?
Because of the lady with the dog?
Lady with the dog. No, that's not why. But even though she was fun to talk to. No, because we were on an elevator, the car elevator.
Oh, that's right. We rode the car elevator up.
Because you drive onto the ferry and then other people drive on with you. And I don't know how many cars are on it, but all of a sudden it's like you're staying in your car. You're not allowed out yet. And the whole floor is elevated to the next level. It's a huge elevator. It was so cool. So we did that going. And of course, we did it coming back as well.
And coming back, we went from Yarmouth to Lymington, Lymington's a little bit further west on the southern coast of England because we were heading towards Cornwall. So we kind of like on our road trip out of Portsmouth, we kind of went across the water through the Isle of Wight and then back up to England. So it kind of worked out pretty good that way. About £100 round trip for two people. Pretty affordable, I think.
We should have taken the train, though, as included. But anyway, whatever. I mean, it's nice to have
to get around.
Yeah, it's nice to have your car. And it's a large island. There's lots to do and there's lots of places to go.
Surprisingly, you cannot fly into the Isle of Wight. There's no major airport. Private planes can fly in, of course. But the closest airport to fly into would be Gatwick, London Gatwick, I think. And then I think you can catch that train that goes to the island from another stop besides Waterloo. You don't have to go all the way to London to get on it. So that's a good way if you're flying in. We drove. So getting around the island for us is a no-brainer. We had a rental car. It was a small car, thank goodness. The roads on the Isle of Wight were pretty small in a lot of places. So we're talking hedgerows. Make sure you know where the pullouts are if cars are coming towards you and share the road like that. But really, it was really easy to get around on the island with our own car.
Yeah, but there was plenty of people who were biking.
Definitely.
There's plenty of people who were taking the bus. And of course, there was a lot of nice walks. It's a very popular place to go and just walk. That's why, like you mentioned, the lady with the dog. they go all the time, they said, and they basically take their dog out there, head to a beach, do some walking, have lunch, and go back. That's their day.
Yeah, it's very popular as just a day out.
Yeah.
Definitely. If you didn't have a car, I think the bus is a really good way to get around. We saw the same thing on the Channel Islands where you could get pretty much anywhere on a bus.
Yeah.
There's a bus pass, 24 hours or 48 hours. You buy it right on the bus, and then you can just get on and get off and go wherever you want.
Yeah.
Works really good. And you can get the bus from any of the ports that you'd come into. Or if you came in on the train actually will go a little bit further. It goes all the way down to Sandown on the East Coast. It doesn't just take you to the island, but there's a couple of stops on the island as well. And one of those stops, you can connect to the steam train, which our timing was bad. So we didn't get to go on the steam train, but I definitely would have done that.
I think we might be heading back to that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, we bought the Heritage Pass.
Yes.
Speaking of like the sites, we'll talk a little bit more about the Heritage Pass, but there's no reason not to go back to England. We have a Heritage Pass for a year.
Exactly. Okay. So where to stay? There are plenty of places to stay on the Isle of Wight. I think what we did is really the preferred way of going. And we stayed in a pub. And so what is the advantage of staying in a pub? You've got a restaurant right downstairs that is going to have food that is really good. We went and stayed in this place called the White Mouse Inn. It was cute as can be. It had a beautiful room where we stayed. It was very labyrinthian walking through the different levels, getting up to our room. But we had kind of an attic room. And gosh, it's one of the largest rooms we had on our entire trip.
It was really big.
And, everything was state of the art. Everything was, it was just perfect. I can't say enough good about it.
Yeah. Obviously new updates in the rooms, even though it was an old inn, an old country inn with a pub, but the rooms were like, you'd think you were in a modern hotel. They were really nice. And it was just a tiny little village with a very cool old church on the outskirts and right near the coast. So definitely a place you would need to drive to, but you got your own car. So as you're driving around.
Or even if by a bus.
Yeah. But other options, I think that would work out really good. If you've got to get on the ferry early the next day, you would probably want to stay in one of the ferry towns. And there's a couple of good options. We'll put those in the notes on places to stay near the ferries.
Okay. And then our favorite thing to talk about is what to eat while we're there. Food. And okay. So one thing the UK has going for it that I haven't seen in a lot of other countries is they do farm shops, farm restaurants well. So what that means is typically it's a farm where they're picking their own produce. Maybe they have their own cows and they have their own creamery, or their dairy or their beef cows. It doesn't even matter. The point is they raise most of the food that they're going to feed you, whether it be the fresh bacon or the first place we stopped was the Bluebell Cafe, which was a farm shop / restaurant. And you could ask Jim. I was just thrilled just with the cream. The cream
and the coffee.
Oh my gosh. I picked up the little creamer. I'm not kidding, folks. Call me a crazy American, but I picked up the creamer and drank it directly from the creamer because it was so
fresh.
Good.
You could see that. You could pretty much watch the cream rising to the top as it was just sitting there. And
I had such a British breakfast. We both did. Jim had a full British English breakfast,
sausage
with the bangers
bacon,
and the black pudding and the beans and the whole spiel. But I had what I had growing up when I lived in England as a young child. I had soft-boiled eggs with a piece of toast cut into strips, which they call soldiers. I don't know if they still do, but they used to call them soldiers.
I think they still do.
And you dip your soldier in the egg, and it's just the perfect consistency. And it's so good. I mean, that breakfast, maybe my most popular breakfast for the whole summer.
And it is a dairy farm, so right outside, in fact, windows looking into one of the barns where the baby calves were just kind of hanging out. We went out and petted them and had a good time. You could go into the shop. Like you said, they had the produce that they have. So dairy products and of course meat products, the sausages that we had for breakfast, you could buy there.
Them. Mm-hmm.
But then they also had different things from nearby farms. So it was just a good place to go. And if you were self-catering, you could really pick up some good stuff.
Which
meals.
we weren't. So we had to get by with just having what was available at the cafe. But boy, it was a great stop. Just a wonderful stop. And what was really cute about that farm was it had it was called the Biddlesford Farm, and it had a little museum on site too.
Oh, it did. The old hop kiln, which a hop kiln is where you dry the hops for making beer. There's not a big beer making industry on the island. So I was kind of curious about that. And what I learned was that all of the big farms made their own beer for their workers mainly. And that's what those hop kilns were there for. They grew everything to make their beer. They made their beer. If they had extra, they may have shared it with neighboring areas, but mostly it was for the farm itself.
Anyway, it was such a great way to start out our day on the Isle of Wight. But it kind of also led us to really searching out farm restaurants for pretty much our entire trip in England.
It's true. And it's a great way to go.
It's just because you just know the food's going to be so fresh.
It's basically farm to table. And oftentimes it's that farm to the table on the farm.
That's right.
So that's pretty cool.
Another one we did there was called the Garlic Farm Restaurant. And that was a destination in and of itself because they had, everything garlic. They showed you how garlic was farmed. They had a whole room of garlic tastings. Then they had 2 restaurants on site. Mm-hmm. We had one, I don't know, we just ate at one of them. I can't even tell you what the difference is really. And we had an excellent charcuterie board. We had some garlic stuffed camembert. We had some pan-fried garlic mushrooms. We had black garlic sticky toffee pudding.
That was the best.
Oh my gosh. I mean, they took the theme and they ran with it. And everything was delicious. Everything was fresh. It was just really
And of course, really you could spend a morning or an afternoon there, not just eating and shopping, but walking around the farm and through the valley and just really the whole experience was so cool. That it was kind of a attraction in and of itself just to go to the garlic farm and wander around the farm and eat. But there was a lot of other things to do on the island too. You mentioned probably the top attraction on the island earlier is the Osborne House, which was the royal residence of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert and their family.
And their 9 children.
Residence. Yeah, their 9 children. And one of the first things that struck me as you're going through the tour into the house was a little sign, a quote from Queen Victoria. And I wish that I had written the exact quote down, but basically she was telling a friend, it's so nice to have a place of one's own, a small place of one's own. Okay, well, the Osborne House.
Hey, it's not small.
It's not small, and probably wasn't just them there. It was them and an army of
servants,
maids, cooks, servants, everybody, gardeners, you name it. But the house itself is just stunning. And all of the artifacts on display, the paintings, the things that were given to the Queen at various times, either birthdays or jubilees or that sort of thing, all on display. Super cool.
2 of the things that really stand out to me, there was a lot of really cool things, but one of them was a whole hallway of servants' paintings, of portraits of
servants.
Yeah, paintings of the servants. And I just thought that was hilarious. I mean, apparently they meant something to them, or else why would they commission someone to paint a portrait of them?
That's right.
So I thought that was very, very cool. And the other thing was they have a little Swiss chalet on the property, and part of the Swiss chalet it was a place really for the kids. They had sort of made it for the kids, and each of their 9 kids had a little plot of land, and the kids were supposed to grow their own produce in their own plot. And then they were supposed to research what the market value for each thing was and sell that produce back to the king and queen. So they were teaching them a little bit about, commerce. And I just thought that was such a nice story. It's a good parental story for anybody, but let alone for such a long time ago.
Little
pretty
homeschooling.
Cool. Yeah, little homeschooling.
Well, and there's also a beach where you can go swimming and wading, and the beach house where Queen Victoria had her swimming machine that would get her into the water safely, I guess. So that was pretty cool too.
And a beautiful garden. I mean, the grounds are spectacular to begin with, but there is one part that's designated as a garden that has lots of really cool things in
the
it.
walled garden.
So
that was pretty cool. With
we
the
spent a lot
shed.
of time there and we loved it. And that was where it was really our first place that we went that cost, a pretty penny.
Pretty dear.
It was pretty dear. So they had the heritage people out there saying, you should get a heritage pass. And they convinced us because we paid £98 for the two of us to get a heritage pass that's good for a full annual year. And even just if we had just paid for the Osborne House, it was going to cost us $50. So basically by going to two of the sites, we more than paid for the pass. And we went to many, many more than two sites. We went to at least 10 or so. So we definitely got our money's worth. And we still have the majority of the year left. So as Jim said, we'll probably be going back and doing more England because why not?
Because why not?
I mean,
cheap flights and things to do while we're there.
So the second place we went on our heritage pass was
the Carisbrooke
Castle.
Yeah.
And we love a castle. Jim and I almost never pass up a castle.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just to slow down, maybe jump out and take a picture, because castles are oftentimes beautiful on the outside, but not really much going on the inside. But Carisbrooke Castle was definitely one you had to park, get out, walk through the stunning twin tower gate, and then into the castle courtyard. And then the castle has never really been attacked or ruined, so it's in great shape. There's a little museum inside one of the buildings that had, of all things, King Charles's nightshirt, because he was imprisoned there shortly after he was ousted, I guess.
It's just an impressive castle, just walking up to it with a big, huge tower and the stone walls. And then inside there was 3 different buildings with different kinds of exhibits in them. One was called a museum. Like Jim said, the whole thing about King Charles trying to take over the crown and things like that, and his banishment and his imprisonment, things like that.
Yeah. And they also did a really good job at a lot of the different heritage places that we went to with trying to make history come alive. So here there was jousting and sword fighting and things like that. And other ones we went to, they had pirates and cannon. And so that was really cool. Of course, oftentimes when there's something like that going on at one of those castles, there's a little bit of an upcharge. I think we had to pay an extra £4 each on top of having the heritage pass.
But still
the heritage
worth
pass
it.
was a good way to go for sure.
So yeah. And then there was a nice chapel that was built on the site. It was fun to walk around. They had donkeys that used to be the people the way they got the well water. It was a lot of fun. It was just a lot of fun. It was pretty much the first castle we went to on our trip, and we enjoyed it.
Might have been my favorite castle of the whole trip until we went to
Orgay on
Jersey. Carisbrooke Castle is way up there on my list. It's a great castle. The other thing in that area, kind of in between the Osborne House and Carisbrooke Castle, that we didn't mention, we probably should have, was St. Mildred's Church.
I was just going to mention it, actually.
Queen Victoria's Chapel. Beautiful old church, the wood ceiling built by shipwrights. So it kind of looks like, a wooden ship up on the ceiling, and a beautiful organ. The stained glass in that little church, I think, was some of the best that I saw in England. I just loved that one.
Yeah, it was pretty nice. And there are times when the priest comes and gives a little talk about the different histories that took place in the church and the way Queen Victoria used it. So you might get lucky and walk in during one of those. That was pretty cool. One thing that I thought was interesting, and we didn't really notice it until we got to the Isle of Wight, because it was pretty much the first place that we were doing everything in a particular order. But every single site, I can't think of an exception, including St. Mildred's Church, they all have their own little tea shop or restaurant or cafe right on site, which makes it super convenient because you don't have to go off touring looking for and then go off and look for something to get for lunch while you're there. So you don't have to leave the grounds. For example, at Osborne House, they had at least 2 restaurants that I can think of, maybe more. So you could spend your time, and both of them had outdoor seating. So you could sit outside in the sun. It was beautiful. And you could eat your lunch and then continue your touring. And everywhere we went, Carisbrooke Castle was the same. All the castles had them. Every place we went. So that was something to note, that you don't really have to worry about looking for something to eat, because whatever you go to visit, there's going to be a cafe there.
That's right. And those tea rooms with some really good, almost all of them had homemade baked goods.
Oh yeah, all of them.
If not full on restaurant meals. And in fact, the Osborne House restaurant, there was people going in to the site to go to the restaurant.
To go to the restaurant, yeah.
So it was a destination in and of itself as well. Of course, the history on the island goes way back.
All the way
and
past the Romans.
Past the Romans, which I was a little bit shocked to find out that there were Roman ruins on the island. Yes, I knew the Romans came into England and
all the way up to Hadrian's Wall.
Went pretty far up towards Scotland. But I guess I never really put it 2 and 2 together to think that, well, sure, there would be Roman villas on the Isle of Wight. And there were Roman villas on the Isle of Wight. So one of the places you can go is the Brading Roman Villa, where they have uncovered the courtyard mosaics, and they're in pretty good shape. So that was maybe one of my favorite sites after Carisbrooke Castle. Just being able to wander around and see those mosaics. They had a couple of other really good displays. One was about the well that they had found and some of the things that they had found in the well. That was pretty cool. It was a little bit strange when we got there because there was nobody at the desk, and it said, go to the tea room to pay, but there was nobody in the tea room either. So,
well, we did get there late. We kind of got there a little bit.
Yeah, we got there a little bit before closing. And, really only needed a good 45 minutes to an hour there.
What I like about almost everything, not everything, but almost everything we did in southwestern England was they also had at every museum, they had something interactive for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was a scavenger hunt that you pick up at the cashier, or a game to play where you're lobbing cannonballs over the wall.
Right.
Or, there was just always something. And Brading, as small as it was no exception. They had, we sat there and watched this young man try to fit a mosaic puzzle together. We watched him for a good 10 minutes, and he was doing it much longer than that. He was determined to get it done. It was really quite nice.
I'd forgotten about that. That was a cool one.
And then from there, we went to something really quirky.
Yeah.
Just because it was fun, and why not? And we love animals.
Yeah. The Isle of Wight Donkey Sanctuary, another completely unexpected thing to find on an island in the British Isles. But they've got like over 100 donkeys that
200, I think.
Oh, but they've got over 200 donkeys that they've rescued from around England. They brought to the island because it's a great place to live. All that sunshine, right? And they take care of them. You can adopt one and help pay for its feed. But the whole experience, the whole visit is free. And you just give donations if you choose or not.
And of course, there's a cafe, so you can spend money there. I
was going to say, again,
and a store.
There's a great tea room cafe there and a little store we can buy donkey themed souvenirs. But we had a great time just walking around, visiting all the donkeys. You can pet them. You can brush them. You can help feed them. It's just a cool place to go. And of course, the bus stop is just right outside at the end of the drive.
Easy to get to. And the last thing that we did was kind of a lark in a way, because it's just the beautiful white cliffs in a place called the Needles. And it's just a viewpoint. So we went there for sunset, which was quite late. I think it was like 8:00 at night or so, which was perfect because we had time to eat and everything before we went. We didn't have to worry about it. We got there too late to do any of the rides. What they've done to make it a little bit more than just a viewpoint is they've put like a few carnival rides down at the end there, which the kids would love. And
there's a chairlift that you can take up that overlooks the Needles. Yeah, there's a couple of different attractions like that on the island where there are rides for kids and things like that.
The steam train.
Yeah, the steam train, all kinds of cool stuff. I really like the Needles. That's also great. One of the great shore walks that you can do, cliff walks that you can do. is out to the Needles.
Well, we didn't do a cliff walk because we only saw it at sunset.
Yeah,
but
we didn't want to go walking out there at night.
But the Isle of Wight, I mean, I think it was a really wonderful day out. Like we said, we spent 24 hours there. So we did spend the night on the island, and then we basically got up the next morning and headed out on the ferry. But we could have spent more time there. We didn't do everything that we could do. So there's still something to go back to. I mean, you never know. And it's just really just I don't know, quaint, charming
area of outstanding natural beauty.
That's right.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.